Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. Thank you for joining us again for a new week, a new episode of Maximize Monday. Whether you're watching on LinkedIn, on YouTube, listening through any of your podcast streaming apps, we appreciate you taking some time out of your day, out of your week to check in with us. So, as you can see, there is a new guest this week. I have Sabrina with me. Thank you so much for taking time to jump on here with me.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course, yeah, I'm glad we could set this up. So, if you know the show, you know we kind of discuss first what's going on for the week ahead. Last week was a little different just because I had a recurring guest, which was weird because last week is when I had like a ton of stuff planned for the week ahead in terms of like getting out of the house and doing things. This week's a little different. So my wife and daughter are going to the beach this week. I unfortunately am not. I will be staying home to take care of the dogs, which is fine. I don't mind kind of that some alone time. So my wife and daughter, and then her brother and his boys are going down to enjoy last hurrah of the summer for her. My wife is still a teacher, so this is kind of the end of the summer break for her, end of the technically summer break for my daughter as she goes back to full-time daycares instead of partial. So they are going to enjoy some sun and sand. So while I will miss them and while I am jealous that they'll get to do that, I do still get the house to myself for a day and a half. So looking forward to like binging the shows that I watch that my wife doesn't necessarily care for. I'll probably just end up watching Philly sports and falling asleep. So nothing too exciting, but that coupled with on Saturday, we actually do have one of the rare date nights where my mother-in-law is going to be taking the little one. My wife and I are going to the Incubus concert. So dinner out, a concert, a rarity these days. So getting to enjoy that is going to be fun as well. So that's kind of what's motivating me outside of work. What my goals are for the week ahead. I have a few different analyst positions right now that are taking a little more focus, a little more focused recruiting, I'll say it that way, in terms of the specialties that are needed for the specific roles. So giving those a little TLC this week because the search is a little bit more focused. Need to be a little bit more creative in terms of where I'm going for the candidates, trying out new job boards, things of that nature. So that's always kind of fun to just kind of explore the different job boards there are, not use the ones that I routinely check in on, but get to know some of the other specialty job boards that focus on like tax analysis, things of that nature. And the other goal for the week is just kind of get more varied in terms of my posting. I've noticed I've been getting into a routine here of like Monday is the video, Wednesday or Tuesday I share a job post, Friday I usually share like a GIF and like an inspirational thing. So trying to get some variety in here in terms of what I'm posting. And then win from the week ahead, beyond, I did fill two positions that week. So just looking to build off of that momentum and make sure we're keep moving forward, getting new people started within their careers with the company. I've said before, it's like a three-way win. I get to close out the position, a candidate gets to start a new role, and hiring manager gets a new employee. So everyone's happy at the end of that. So that's what's going on in my week. Sabrina, what have you got going on in your world this week?
All right. Well, first of all, you have a lot going on and enjoy binge watching those shows. That's a great time.
Yeah.
Um, this past week, I'm on summer vacation. I'm a teacher as well. And I actually am transitioning out of the classroom, but still in education. I will become an attendance analyst
Okay.
at a public school here in Springfield. And it's more of what I want to do. So I'll be working with kids who are chronically absent, making sure that they come to school and figuring out that root cause and getting them to finish their education, which is really important work for me.
Mhm.
So I'm happy to be leaving the classroom to be doing something a little bit different and
Yeah,
still working with kids and working in education.
for sure.
Um, so I'm enjoying my free time. This Saturday, I'm going to spend actually the weekend in Boston, just visiting a couple of friends and having some time to relax before the school year starts for us as well. And I'll have to go back to work.
Mhm.
But I'm really just looking forward to starting my new position and doing something different, not having to worry about lesson planning and the stress of being a teacher. And also starting to work on some of my personal projects and personal goals,
Yeah.
like my own podcast, actually.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, I'm very happy for you to get away from that lesson planning. I know we've talked in the past, and that was one of the things. And that's one of those things for teachers. You know, some people really love it, some dread it. So I was in the camp that sometimes it was fun, most of the time it was not. So it was just kind of finding that balance. So for you, and we talked a few months ago initially off the podcast, and that's when we had kind of discussed you being on here, just because you were starting that journey to transition into something new. You were kind of getting a feel for what was out there, what you could pivot into. So with the position that you're moving into, still involved in the school as part of a school district, was that something that really aligned with what you wanted to do? You knew that education in general was a field that you were passionate about. It just wasn't the classroom portion of it that made you want to stick around on that end.
So I went on a little self-discovery journey during that time when we last talked. I
Mhm.
know I wanted to move out of the classroom and I was looking into working in the tech industry. I was really just trying to figure out what I want to do because I'm so young. I'm only 23. I feel like I'm at an age where I'm really trying to figure out like what's my purpose and ask those bigger questions about myself. And so I wasn't happy working in the classroom. Like I mentioned, lesson planning is not my thing. I'm one of those teachers where it's like I will write it down on a sticky note 5 minutes before class. And we'll have a great class, but
Right.
it's just not for me. So I was really trying to figure. I was very unhappy at the school I was working at, and I knew that I loved working with the kids, and I knew that at a young age, like I always wanted to uplift and empower students, especially like youth of color, especially as an Afro Latina woman. It was important to me to be able to uplift that community.
Mhm.
So while I was on this journey trying to figure out if I wanted to work in tech and leave kids behind, I found that was going to be very challenging for me to do just because like I knew that it wasn't the kids that were the problem, it was the education system. I really didn't like how they treated teachers or educators in general, and I didn't want to be in a classroom anymore, but I couldn't give up my purpose of working with youth of color, so I started looking for something else and keeping that purpose in mind. And I was also navigating tech interviews as well, just trying to figure out like what's the best decision for me. And in the end, I decided to take a quick pause on the tech stuff just because I really want to be aligned with my purpose and working with youth of color.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that kind of poses a good question, because it's a lot of teachers that are trying to find something new still kind of want to keep their foot in education because they are passionate about the overall purpose of being a teacher like you are. So while you were going through those interviews, what were some of the questions that you were asking to make sure that you were being very pointed in your research in terms of a new job and making sure that it was the right fit for you, and kind of eliminating some of the positions, because you're entering a new industry. It's a whirlwind, and you have to ask the right questions, and it sounds like you did, because you ultimately got to something that you're very interested in and allows you to keep your purpose. So what were some of those questions that you tried to focus on in terms of how is this the right fit for me moving forward?
My number one question is always about the environment, the work environment. I was very ecstatic about taking my previous role, but I came to find that the work environment just didn't work for me.
Mhm.
So some of the questions that I like to ask are how do you support, celebrate, and just really embrace diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging for people of color in your community and in your company, and really hearing those answers and really just diving deep into what that means for them as a person of color and as a woman of color. It's important to know that wherever I'm going to be working at is going to celebrate me and also support me if I'm having challenges.
Mhm.
I learned pretty young that I'm going to be dealing with these challenges for the rest of my life, and it is hard. And I want to be working at a place where I don't have to deal with those challenges alone, or the work environment makes those challenges worse for me.
Yeah.
So that was one thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. So beyond that, during your search, and I think this is kind of the overwhelming purpose portion of the interview process for a lot of people. And you and I had talked earlier. You and I had told you that it was good that you had kind of this clear, concise path of this is what I want to explore, which ultimately kind of led you to where you are now. So when going over your potential opportunities coming out of the classroom, what were some of those things that you developed as an educator that you were like, this is what I do love about teaching, and this is what I would like to take with me into the next role that I'm going to pursue?
Yeah, some of those transferable skills that I thought I wanted to take with me, like into tech, would be like I really love helping people, and I really love seeing that light bulb moment for people. So really ensuring that I teach them something new. I'm a lifelong learner. I love education. I love school. It's my thing. It's something that interests me, and so just finding a way to do that with other people in a different aspect. So I originally wanted to be a sales engineer in tech. So I show people how the software, the platform works, answer their questions, so on and so forth. So still educating them just in a different way. And then I guess the other thing too is I really love communication of any kind. So whether that's in person, through Zoom, email, So finding a position that will allow me to continue to work on my communication skills and just really interacting with people as much as possible, preferably face to face. But I mean, as we move into a more technical world, as long as it's on Zoom where I get to actually see someone, that's nice as well. So those are the two things that I think are the biggest transferable skills that I want to take with me.
Yeah, and now that you're stepping into this new role, what are some of the things that excite you the most about it in terms of showing people those wins? You're stepping into a role now that you seem excited about and that kind of fits what you wanted to do, keeping, what's important to you while still giving you some new opportunities. So, share some of those things that people can look forward to when they're transitioning out of the classroom. What are you excited about learning the most? What are you excited about the position that you're going to be doing the most as well?
So I'm really excited about my role being specifically more focused on relationship building. I loved that as a teacher. I love getting to learn the kids outside of the classroom and outside of like grammatical rules because I taught ELA. So just actually getting to meet a person and see them for them and not a grade or whatever the case may be, that was something that I was very passionate about. So now that I don't have to worry about grading and I don't have to worry about do they meet the Massachusetts standards, and I just really focus on building a relationship with them, I'm really excited about that. I think that what I'll be doing working with kids who are chronically absent, that's important. That's an important foundation to have. I can't ask a kid to come to school every day and they have no idea who I am. They've never met me. They're not comfortable talking to me. So being able to build those relationships, which I feel like I do very well, I take a lot of pride in investing with time into building relationships with youth. I think that's something that I'm really looking forward to. And also being honest with kids. I feel like when you're working in education, especially as a teacher, you have to tread lightly on the things that you say, even if you feel like it's real world advice, because it can come back to affect you and your job. So the like for example, like I understand like college isn't for everyone. And that is perfectly fine. I'm a first generation college graduate. College was for me, but it wasn't for anyone in my family, and that's okay. And I felt like kind of icky about saying that as a teacher because it's like, well, you're a teacher, you went to college, and like, isn't that the whole point? But in reality, like, yes, I went to college and I am a teacher and stuff, but that doesn't mean that I don't understand how the real world works and that the real world doesn't necessarily need you to go to college. There are other ways for you to be successful without going to college, but you do need to finish high school, so come to school.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you and I first spoke, I kind of told you that you were going about things the right way. You took networking very seriously. You were looking for advice from where you could get it. And that's kind of one of the overwhelming tasks too when you're first getting started, especially on LinkedIn, because I didn't use LinkedIn at all when I was in the classroom. I knew what it was, but I was like, what's the point? I don't need it. And I think that's a lot of what educators face at this point when they're getting started, the networking side of LinkedIn. How do I get connected with people that are going to help me get on the right path? So for you, what did that process look like? What was important for you? What worked for you when it came to building up your network and getting that advice from people that were kind of doing what you were interested in doing?
Yeah, so how I built up my network, and honestly, like I was looking back at my LinkedIn like analytics and stuff, and I had only been on it for like 2 months by the time that I had networked with you and met you. And it felt so long. But what I did essentially is like I started with figuring out what I wanted to do first. So I knew I wanted to work in tech. And so I started figuring out what companies do I want to work for. And I literally just sat there and spoke to the people that work there and just started clicking, follow, 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 like connect with as many people as you can. It feels random, but there is a purpose. And once you start getting those connections, just introduce yourself. If they have LinkedIn Lives, definitely attend LinkedIn Lives because they take notice in that. And actually, Shanae Urquhart, she works at Microsoft, and she does a lot of helping people with get into tech and give them advice and stuff. Um, I thought I was never going to be able to connect with her. I just kind of like watched from the sidelines, just so many connections. So I ended up coming to her LinkedIn Lives as much as possible, and she ended up connecting with me. And she recognized me just from attending the LinkedIn Lives as much as possible and trying to talk in them. So I would definitely recommend like just start like mass connecting with people, as many people as you can, especially in those companies that you know you want to work for. So you can start to meet people and just get your name in there. Schedule like coffee chats, or I know some people don't like that coffee chats or like little meetups so that you can get to know people who work there and just build your network and ask questions about what does that transition look like for you. I think for me, transitioning from the classroom to tech, it's kind of hard for people to answer because they don't really take that route, but they still give great advice about it, which is amazing for me to get to learn, especially because it was something new for me. I didn't go to school to work in tech, obviously. I didn't even go to school to be an educator.
Right.
Yeah, so just ask me as many questions as possible, even random things that come to your mind. And I think the last thing that's very important is when you have these conversations, just be personable, like be a human being. Don't be a robot who just asks questions on the sheet. Like, okay, see it, never see you again, or whatever the
Right.
case may be. Be memorable and just be yourself and be comfortable with that. And like it's LinkedIn. I think that's easier than networking in person, to be honest, because it's just like you can do it anytime, whenever you're comfortable, and like because you have that little barrier, stepping into something new is always going to be challenging for sure. But because you have that computer screen or your phone as that barrier, it can be a little bit easier. And now with Chat GPT, it's way easier, way easier. It helps you formulate the messages and everything. So
Yeah.
just take that step.
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely a safety net there and sending the message. And then, if they read it, great. If they respond, even better. If not, move on. It is what it is. It's not as awkward as doing that in person for sure.
Right.
For
And you
sure.
get to practice.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So one of the questions I like to ask anyone in terms of when they were making their transition, finding something new that they wanted to do. And you were someone that went to different LinkedIn live events and reached out to people, asked for advice. So what was that key piece of advice that you eventually got that kind of led you to take the pause that you needed to do to readjust your search and now find something that you're excited about, passionate about moving forward?
The key thing was making sure that your purpose and your passion align and that you get paid well for that. And so I knew that I wanted to work with youth of color, and I knew I wanted to uplift just the people of color community in general. And so I was happy with working with kids. I just wasn't happy in the classroom, and I knew that for a fact. And I feel like everybody suffers with a little bit of imposter syndrome when they start to transition into something new. So I was still applying for teaching positions, knowing full and well that's not what I wanted, but because I was qualified, I was doing it anyway, kind of like a safety net.
Mhm.
But I was definitely getting in my own way. And so I started applying for jobs that would still allow me to work in education, but were more like clerical or full time, like 12-year round positions. And that's how I ended up in my role. And just really understanding what your passion is at first. I will say that my long-term goal is not to work in education. I don't want to be there long term. My long-term goal is to essentially start a podcast and have a social media presence where I continue to uplift youth of color and people of color in general, just on a broader scale. And so that's my passion in the way I'm able to align that with what I do now, because education doesn't pay. I'm not getting paid well for what I do, but I love it.
Mhm.
But I'm able to do what I love and also work on my passion project on the side so that eventually I will be getting paid well for it. And I think the other thing too is to keep in mind is like getting paid well for something isn't always monetary. Like money is important and life is expensive out here in the US. Like, let's
Yeah.
be real about it. But I would not have traded my last year of education working with my students for a higher salary. I think that was something that was very rewarding for me. I learned so much from my students, and I learned so much from that 1 year of teaching. I don't want to teach again, which is also a valuable lesson.
Yeah.
But I don't think I would have traded that for a job that would have paid me six figures.
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk about the passion project a little bit because you and I discussed that when we first spoke as well, in terms of you wanting to start a podcast. And I'll always pound the table for anyone that's wanting to do that. I'm a part of so many. And, do we need another wrestling podcast? Do we need another fantasy sports podcast? No, but it's an outlet for me. It's something that I do to kind of connect with people, get to know people, get to talk about things that interest me. So that's kind of why this one is a little different, just because I get to focus on a new person every week, someone new telling their story, sharing their experiences, and giving insight to a job searching community right now that's overwhelmed, frustrated, and needs to hear about wins, needs to hear about what they can do. So with your passion project, your podcast, what would you say would be the overall goal when you're trying to get this started? What are some things that you're going to want to touch on, and how can people get in touch with you if they're interested in the same thing and would want to contribute to what you're doing?
Okay, thanks. So my passion project is the podcast, and I actually finally gave it a name. I
Nice.
was trying to juggle on a couple different names, but I essentially landed on the Hood Soft Life podcast. And essentially, what it's going to be about is essentially my journey from leaving poverty and leaving the hood into getting into the soft life that I want to have, where I'll essentially be financially free and I'll be working a job that makes me happy. And I won't have to stress about things like pay my bills or things that most people who live in poverty have to struggle with. I think there are a lot of people out there who talk about, like, if you do these three things, you'll get to where you want to be. If you just manifest all day, then you'll get to where you want to be. And while some of that stuff is definitely true, I think that there aren't a lot of people talking about the harsh reality of, like, if you're coming from literally nothing, it is way harder to do that. And especially as a Afro Latina woman coming from poverty, there are not a lot of Afro Latina women talking about the same perspective that I've had. So it makes it challenging. And I wanted to create a podcast where essentially, like, I'll touch on the harder things about it, because I think everyone tries to glamorize a transition in any form.
Mhm.
And nobody ever really talks about, like, the hardest parts or even the ugliest parts of a transition, and just being honest about that, and being honest about the fact that there are setbacks and there are challenges, and it's not a linear path like everybody says.
Mhm.
It is, just really having a place where I can share that vulnerability and hopefully touch other people who are doing the same thing. I know we had talked about this a little bit, but I grew up in poverty in Hartford, Connecticut as an Afro Latina woman, and I wanted to go and receive a higher education, and my family wasn't that supportive of it. So that essentially left me to do it on my own. And while I graduated a semester early, I always have to throw that in there. It's
Yeah.
hard and it's challenging, especially when you don't have people who have done it before you and you have to figure it out on your own. So my hope is to be able to help other people as I go on the journey myself.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely keep on the lookout for it, and I'll keep in touch with you so that when you start sharing it and have episodes live, we can share that with the network as well. But I appreciate so much you taking some time to jump on here with me. It's nice to kind of talk about the wins, and I know that when you and I first discussed you being on here, it was at the point where you weren't sure what the next steps were. So I'm very happy to hear that the next steps are positive ones for you, and you're looking forward always. So thank you again for listening, everyone, for watching. If you want to connect with Sabrina, I will tag her in the post here. Make sure that you follow her journey as well, and we'll talk to you next week.